Welcome back, friends. In this video, we will clearly understand the concept of decerebrate rigidity in a simple and exam-oriented way. The first thing you should remember for your exams is the site of lesion. It is in the midbrain between the superior and the inferior colliculi, also called as intercollicular level. Very much clear. Now let's understand the mechanism behind the decerebrate rigidity. We all know that the muscle tone and the posture are regulated and integrated at multiple levels of the central nervous system. And these levels include the spinal cord, medulla oblongata, pons, midbrain, while the highest level of control is coming from the cerebral cortex and the basal ganglia. Now, at the spinal cord level, the posture is influenced by stretch reflex, crossed extensor reflex, positive and negative supporting reactions. At the medullary level, it is the tonic neck reflex and the labyrinthine reflexes, and at the level of the midbrain, the writing reflexes are the one which help regulate and maintain the posture. Now remember that the lesion is located between superior and inferior colliculi, where midbrain. So this is the midbrain, and let's say this is the superior colliculi, and this is the inferior colliculus. And where is the lesion? The lesion is exactly here. Hence, in decerebrate rigidity, the writing reflexes are lost because the writing reflexes are integrated at the level of the midbrain. But the reflexes which are arising from the medulla as well as from the spinal cord are intact. Next important point. In the pons, there is a reticular formation from which is arising a tract which is called as the pontine reticulospinal tract. So what's the name of this tract? It is called as the pontine reticulospinal tract. Fine. This tract has got a facilitatory effect on alpha and the gamma motor neurons which are present in the spinal cord. So what kind of influence it is having? It is having a facilitatory influence. One more very important point to remember here is that the pontine reticulospinal tract is said to be intrinsically active. That means it is always active. Continuously, it is providing facilitatory impulses to these motor neurons. Similarly, there is also a reticular formation where in the medulla, from which is arising a tract which is called as medullary reticulospinal tract. Now, unlike the pontine reticulospinal tract, the medullary reticulospinal tract has got an inhibitory effect on the alpha and the gamma motor neurons in the spinal cord. Now, however, one very important point to remember here is that this medullary reticulospinal tract is not intrinsically active. It is not at all intrinsically active. So that means its activity, that is the activity of the medullary reticulospinal tract, is dependent upon the facilitatory input it is receiving from the higher centers, particularly from the cerebral cortex as well as the basal ganglia. So the cerebral cortex and the basal ganglia are having facilitatory influence on the medullary reticulospinal tract, and medullary reticulospinal tract is having an inhibitory influence on the alpha and the gamma motor neurons of the spinal cord. Okay, so pontine reticulospinal tract is facilitatory, intrinsically active. The medullary reticulospinal tract is inhibitory, not intrinsically active, but its activity is dependent upon the inputs which are coming from the cerebral cortex and the basal ganglia, and these are facilitatory inputs which the medullary reticulospinal tract is getting. Now, the third important structure that we need to remember here is something which is called as the red nucleus. What's the name of this? Red nucleus. And where it is present? This red nucleus is present in the upper part of the midbrain, and it gives rise to a tract which is called as the rubrospinal tract. What's the name of the tract? Rubrospinal tract. Okay, now this tract is descending down to the spinal cord, where it is again influencing our alpha and the gamma motor neurons. But this tract, what it is doing, it is facilitating the flexor muscles and it is inhibiting the extensor muscles. Very, very important point to remember. Now let's get back to the site of the lesion. So where is the site of lesion? The site of lesion is here in the midbrain between the superior colliculus and the inferior colliculus. Okay, so now what is happening because of the lesion? Whenever a lesion is occurring here, the excitatory input from the cerebral cortex and the basal ganglia to the medullary reticular formation is interrupted. First thing to happen is that. Now, as a result of that interruption, the medullary reticulospinal tract is going to become inactive. The medullary reticulospinal tract is going to become inactive. Remember the function of the medullary reticulospinal tract. What did I tell you? That is to inhibit the alpha and the gamma motor neurons in the spinal cord. So that is why, because of the lesion here, what is happening? This inhibitory influence of the medullary reticulospinal tract is lost. Secondly, the lesion is also interrupting which tract? The rubrospinal tract. And what did the rubrospinal tract did? It facilitated the flexor muscles and it inhibited the extensor muscles. So when it is damaged, what is going to happen? The inhibitory influence on the extensor muscles is also lost. Now at the same time, what we are supposed to remember, this is the most interesting part, is that the pontine reticulospinal tract is remaining intact here, and it is also intrinsically active. So it continues to send the facilitatory impulses to the alpha and the gamma motor neurons. Thus the inhibitory influence is lost, whereas the facilitatory influence is remaining unopposed. That's the word you are supposed to use in your exams also. Inhibitory influence is lost, the facilitatory influence is remaining unopposed. So the net result here is marked extensor hypotonia. What it is called? Marked extensor, not hypotonia, because of the loss of inhibition. So this is the one which is producing the characteristic posture which we see in decerebrate rigidity. This is very important, not just directly going to the characteristic features. So once you understand this mechanism, I bet you don't have to memorize the characteristic features. They are going to follow logically. So let's go through them one by one. So the first and foremost and the most obvious feature here is rigidity. That is decerebrate rigidity. This is how the person's posture will be whenever there is a lesion at the intercollicular level. So what is going to happen? There is marked rigidity, isn't it? Now why is this happening? We have already understood that because the extensor muscles are becoming overactive because of unopposed facilitatory influences. Now as a result of that, we are seeing spasticity in all the anti-gravity muscles, the upper and lower limb muscles, that is both all the four limb muscles, they are held in hyperextension. The neck is hyperextended. Here you can see the neck is hyperextended. The upper limb and the lower limb muscles are also hyperextended. The spine is also hyperextended, and that is what is called as opisthotonus. So there is hyperextension of the spine. What are happening to the toes? The toes are pointed downwards. That is, they are plantar flexed, pointing downwards, while just the wrists and the fingers are flexed. This is what is the characteristic posture we see in what is called as decerebrate rigidity. Okay, now let's also correlate the findings with the site of the lesion. So what is going to happen? Where is the site of the lesion? The site of the lesion is in the midbrain. So what reflexes were arising from the midbrain which helped in integrating and maintaining the posture? The writing reflexes. So do you think the writing reflexes will be intact? No. The first and foremost thing is that the writing reflexes are absent, but there is no impact on the spinal cord and the medulla. So all those reflexes arising from the spinal cord and medulla are present or strongly positive. Stretch reflex is exaggerated and strongly positive. Positive supporting reaction arising from the spinal cord elicited. Negative supporting reaction arising from the spinal cord elicited. Crossed extensor reflex, all these arising from the spinal cord and they are present. The tonic neck and labyrinthine reflexes at the level of the medulla, they are also present. What is again lost is the inputs from the cerebral cortex is what is absent. So remember, in physiology, you just don't memorize, you understand the mechanism first. And once the mechanism is clear, the clinical features of any disorder or disease is going to be easy to predict, very easy to predict and very easy to remember also. If this explanation made the topic easier for you, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss on our next high yield physiology video. Thank you for watching.